How to achieve hard goal easy. Have you ever looked at something you really want and thought, there's no way I can do that? Maybe it's getting fit, learning a new skill, starting a business, making money, writing a book, creating content, or just becoming the person you've been saying you want to become. The goal sounds exciting when you think about it, but then you actually think about everything it will take, and suddenly you don't want to do it anymore. You feel tired before you've even started. And that's strange, isn't it? Because the goal itself hasn't changed. You're just thinking about all the work at once. And that might be one of the biggest reasons hard goals feel so hard. All right, let's be real. I have a feeling most people who click this video won't make it to the end. Not because there's anything wrong with the video, but because most people don't actually want to deal with the uncomfortable part of achieving a difficult goal. They want the result.
And honestly, I get it, because I think most of us make hard goals much harder than they actually are. A lot of us don't really have a problem with wanting something. We have a problem with beginning. We say things like, I'll start Monday, I need to learn more first, I need a better plan, I'll do it when I have more time, or I just need to get motivated. And sometimes those reasons are real. But sometimes we're just trying to avoid the uncomfortable feeling that comes with being a beginner. Because starting means admitting you don't know what you're doing yet. Starting means being bad at something. Starting means making mistakes. Starting means there is no guarantee you'll succeed. So instead of starting, we think, we plan, we watch videos, we buy the equipment, we make the perfect schedule. We imagine how great the result will be. And somehow after all that preparation, we still haven't done the thing. Maybe you've experienced this.
You want to get in shape, so you spend an hour researching workout plans. You want to learn a language, so you download 5 apps. You want to start a YouTube channel, so you spend weeks thinking about cameras, thumbnails, editing software, and channel names. You want to start a business, so you keep researching business ideas. Then there's nothing wrong with preparation. The problem is when preparation becomes a comfortable place to hide. Because thinking about the goal feels productive, but thinking about the goal isn't the same as moving toward it. And there's another problem. We usually imagine the entire journey at once. Think about climbing a mountain. If you're standing at the bottom and staring all the way to the top, of course it looks impossible. You see the distance, you see the rocks, you see the steep parts. You start thinking about how tired you're going to be, and you start wondering whether you can actually make it. Suddenly, the mountain feels enormous.
But here's the interesting part. The person climbing the mountain isn't thinking about the entire mountain every second. They're thinking about the next step, then another, then another. They don't need to solve the entire climb before taking step 1. And that's something we forget in everyday life. We want certainty before action. We want to know exactly how the story ends before we're willing to begin the first chapter. But life doesn't really work that way. Imagine you want to become a good writer. You might think, I need to become really good at writing. But that's such a huge idea. Instead, you could write 1 paragraph today. That's it. Maybe it's terrible. Fine. Tomorrow, you write another one. Now you've learned something. You know what was difficult. You know what you need to improve. And suddenly, the goal isn't some giant thing sitting in the future anymore. It's something you're actually doing. And this is where everything starts to make sense.
The secret to making a hard goal feel easier isn't always finding a better strategy. Sometimes it's making the first move smaller. So here's the idea. Just start. That's the core. Just start. Not finish, not master it, not become amazing at it, not create the perfect plan. Just start. And I know that sounds almost too simple, but that's exactly why we overlook it. We think the first step should be impressive. We think if we're serious about getting fit, we need a perfect workout. If we're serious about reading, we need to read for an hour. If we're serious about business, we need to build the whole thing. If we're serious about creating content, we need to make the perfect video.
But your first step doesn't need to prove anything. It only needs to create movement. Want to get fit? Do 5 push-ups. Go for a 10-minute walk. You don't need to become a completely different person today. Want to read more? Read 2 pages. Not 50, just 2. Want to learn a language? Learn 5 words. Want to start a business? Talk to 1 potential customer. Not 100, just 1. Want to create content? Make 1 video. It might be awkward. It might get 10 views. You might look back at it 6 months later and cringe. That's okay, because now you have something you didn't have before. Experience. And experience teaches you things that thinking never can. This is why starting matters so much. The first action doesn't just move you closer to the goal, it gives you information. You discover what works. You discover what doesn't. You discover what you're actually interested in. You discover where you're struggling, and then you can adjust. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. Nobody explains every possible movement before letting you touch the bike. At some point, you have to get on. You wobble, you lose balance, you make corrections, you try again. And eventually, something that felt impossible becomes normal. That's how a lot of difficult things work. You don't understand everything first and then act. You act, and understanding comes with it. But there's something else people miss. Starting doesn't mean you have to commit to the biggest version of your goal. Maybe you want to run a marathon. You don't have to run a marathon tomorrow. You can walk, then jog, then run a little farther. The goal can stay huge. Your next action just needs to be small. That's an important difference, because sometimes people think making the goal smaller means thinking smaller. It doesn't. You can have a huge goal and a tiny next step. That's actually a powerful combination. The vision gives you direction. The small step gives you movement, and movement creates momentum. Let's say you want to build a YouTube channel. At first, you might imagine having thousands of subscribers. You imagine making great videos. You imagine people watching your content. That's exciting. But then you look at where you are right now. 0 videos. Suddenly, the distance between where you are and where you want to be feels ridiculous. So don't focus on the channel. Focus on the first video. Write the idea. Record it. Edit it. Upload it. That's 1 complete action. Then you do another, and another. Eventually, you're no longer someone who wants to start a YouTube channel. You're someone who makes videos. And that's a much bigger change than it sounds, because the goal isn't only changing what you accomplish, it's changing what you believe about yourself. Every time you take action, you're giving yourself evidence. I said I would do this, and I did. That matters, because confidence usually doesn't come before action. A lot of the time, confidence comes from action. You don't wait until you feel confident enough to begin. You begin, and confidence slowly catches up. And this is where I think we make things unnecessarily difficult. We keep waiting for the right feeling, the right motivation, the right morning, the right amount of energy, or the perfect circumstances. But if you always need to feel ready, you'll spend a lot of your life waiting. Some days you'll feel motivated. Some days you won't. Some days you'll feel like you can conquer everything. Other days you'll barely want to get out of bed. That's normal. The goal isn't to become someone who always feels motivated. The goal is to become someone who can take a small step even when motivation isn't there. And again, that step can be incredibly small. Because once you're moving, the next step becomes easier to see. And maybe that's the part we've been missing. Now, just starting doesn't mean being careless. It doesn't mean you shouldn't learn. It doesn't mean planning is useless. It doesn't mean every dream will magically work out if you take 1 step. Some goals are genuinely difficult. Some take years. Some require money, skills, patience, and sacrifice. But you can't solve a 5-year problem with 5 years of thinking.
At some point, you need a first day.
And that's what just start really means. It means stop demanding that your first step look like the final result. Your first attempt is allowed to be a first attempt. That's not failure. That's the beginning. So here's something I want you to do today. Pick one hard goal you've been thinking about. Not 10, one. And ask yourself, what would the smallest possible version of starting look like? If you want to get fit, maybe it's 5 push-ups. If you want to write, maybe it's 1 paragraph. If you want to learn, maybe it's 5 minutes. Make it so small that your brain has a hard time arguing against it. And then do it today. Not tomorrow, not Monday. Today. Because the hardest part of a long journey is often not the distance. It's moving from 0 to 1. Once you're at 1, you're no longer stuck at 0. And tomorrow, you can go from 1 to 2, then 2 to 3, and eventually, you look back and realize something strange. You don't need to see the whole path. You just need to see enough of it to take the next step.
So start badly. Start small. Start uncertain. Start before you feel completely ready. Because you can improve something once it's moving. You can fix a bad first attempt. You can learn from a mistake. You can change direction. But you can't improve something you never begin. That's how hard goals become easier. Not because the goal suddenly became easy, but because you stopped trying to do all of it at once. Just start and see where that first step takes you. If this helps you, give us a like so more people can find it. And if you'd like videos like this, subscribe. We've got more on the way. And as always, stay focused.